second presentation. She's on Zoom. So I spoke to her and she said it shouldn't be a problem. She'll just tell us when to advance the slides because I said it's not a screen share, so you're not going to see what they see. Okay. So anyway, we'll see how it goes. Should work. Okay.
We will now convene the regular session at 6 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which is liberty and justice for all.
The board met in closed session to discuss board deliberation regarding personnel matters. Approve the June 26, 2024 regular meeting agenda. And motion to approve. Any discussion? Roll call. Valerie? Aye. Teresa? Aye. Sammy?
Aye.
And I. Presentations. We will have 3 presentations tonight. The first is the 2022-2023 Parkland Joint Unified School District's annual audit. Crystal Pereira.
Good evening. My name is Crystal Pereira. I'm the partner. I was partner on the audit this last year. So first off, I want to thank you guys for having me tonight. I know audits can be very time consuming for everyone involved. And so thanks for working with us this year. I'll be discussing our responsibilities as auditors and explain a little bit about the audit process.
Sorry. So I'll be discussing our responsibilities as auditors and explain a little bit about the process and discuss some of the areas that we deem most important to the financial statements. And then I'll review some of the highlights for the 22-23 year, go over the findings and management comments at the end, and then happy to answer any questions. So first off, I just wanted some things to point out that are important for the board to understand is that we conduct our audit in accordance with U.S. generally accepted auditing standards for the financial portion of the audit. We follow uniform grant guidance for the federal portion of the audit, and then we follow the state's audit guide for the state mandated portion of the audit, which is better known as state compliance. The purpose of the audit is to express an opinion about whether the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects in conformity with U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. When we're doing the audit, we audit in terms of materiality. So we don't necessarily look at everything. We apply risk assessment procedures to determine which areas we're going to look at using various materiality thresholds. And then we have discussions with management and look at any areas that they may see as potential issues. For the federal portion of the audit, it's better known as the single audit, and that is required because the district expended more than $750,000 in federal funds. This year, we audited the Child Nutrition Cluster and the Education Stability Fund, which is related to all the COVID funding, ESSER and GARE funding. Typically, we go out to the district 2 times a year. The first time we do the state compliance portion, and then when we come back in the fall, we do our internal controls and the financial portion of the audit. So getting to the audit report itself, some financial highlights. The report is broken up into different sections. It starts on page 1 through 3, where we have our independent auditors report. And that's behind the introduction tab. And our auditors report states our auditor's responsibility, which again is to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. And for this auditor's report, we expressed an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can give. Following our independent auditor's report, we have the management discussion and analysis on pages 4 through 12. This gives us summarized financial information in comparative form to prior year, and it also highlights on various district operations using the audited financial statements. The district prepares the MD&A, and we don't audit this, but we do review it for accuracy. And so if you see on page 7, in the MD&A section, you'll see the comparison of the district's net position in table 1, which includes a total net position of 40.7 million in the 2023 year, which is a 21.2 million increase compared to 2022. After the MD&A, we have our financial section and our notes to the financials. So we start with our statement of net position and statement of activities on pages 13 and 14. And on this, you can see that the total net position is 40,678,269. Last year's statements, that number was 19,473,274. On our statement of activities, you can see that the total revenue for the year exceeded the total expenses by 21,140,375. There was a prior period adjustment of 64,620 that was related to a change in the student body activity fund. Next, on page 15, we have our balance sheet, which is broken down by major fund and shows a total fund balance of approximately 32.5 million. On page 16, we have the reconciliation of the governmental funds balance sheet and the statement of net position, with the number on top representing the total fund balance and the bottom number representing the total net position. And most of those reconciliation are your capital assets, your long-term debt, and just how it's recognized at the fund level versus the government-wide level. On page 17, we have the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, which shows a net increase in fund balance of 11,504,969. On page 18, we have the reconciliation of the governmental funds, statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, and the statement of activities. Again, that's another reconciliation, but on the profit and loss side between the fund level and government-wide level. After the reconciliation, we have our notes to the financial statements, and these give more detail and explanation to the financial statement themselves. Some of the more sensitive disclosures that affect the financial statement are probably the disclosures of long-term debt, fund balances, and restricted net position, along with the pension plan and OPEB. And those can be found in notes 7, 8, 10, and 11. After our notes, we have our required supplementary information. So this is information that we are required to disclose. And we start off with the general fund budgetary comparison schedule. And then afterwards is information on the net pension liability. And there's 2 different schedules related to that. And those are 10-year comparisons. But since we only have 9 years of data since the implementation of that Cusd standard, we only present 9 years worth. And then following that, we have our OPEB liability disclosures. And same thing, that one requires a 10-year schedule, but 10 years aren't available yet. So we just have the amount of years since that Cusd was implemented. This year, we added notes to our required supplementary information to just give it a more clean look. So that's what's followed on page 44. That's the notes to our required supplementary information. Then we have other supplementary information, and a lot of these schedules are schedules that are required by the state audit guide with our state compliance. So we have schedules of average daily attendance and instructional time. And then we have our financial trends and analysis. That's on page 56. And you can see that that gives a little more detail about the general fund. And it discloses prior year data along with the 2023 actual data and 2024 budget data. You can see that the general fund balance increased by approximately 12.7 million over the past 2 years. Long-term debt has decreased by approximately 6.9 million over the past 2 years. And average daily attendance has also decreased by 120 over the past 2 years. And your available reserves as a percentage of total outgo remain above the state requirements at 4.8%. Following our other supplementary information, we have our other auditors reports. So in this section, we have those 3 additional audit reports, which is our internal controls over financial reporting and on compliance. That's our yellow book audit, which is because you are a governmental entity and receive governmental funds, you're required to have a yellow book audit. Then we have our report on compliance on major federal programs. And again, that's because you're a single audit and expend more than $750,000 of federal funds. And finally, our report on state compliance, and that is because you're a school and that is a required audit report. All 3 of those reports we issued unmodified opinions on. Again, that's the highest level of assurance. We did have some findings in the state compliance section only. So our financial and federal portion of the audit, we found no findings, but we did have state compliance findings. Our first state compliance finding had to do with attendance. The district understated its ADA by 2.16 on the P2 and overstated it by 0.45 on the annual attendance report. The estimated dollar value is $29,921, causing a potential increase in funding for that P2. And the difference of the annual ADA, because it is less than 1 ADA, there would be no fiscal impact. The second finding we had was the classroom teacher salaries. And that is because the district spent less than the required percentage of the current expense of education on classroom teacher salaries and benefits. The district files a waiver for this and it was a repeat finding. So it's just common. We have to report it as a finding because the state audit guide tells us to, but there's no real repercussions because you guys filed that waiver and you have a reasoning for it. The next finding we have was with our unduplicated LCFF pupil counts. In our testing, we found that 5 of the 60 students were ineligible. So we performed an extrapolation to determine a total error. And we determined that total error would be 37 students with an estimated fiscal impact of a reduction in funding of $96,467. The next finding we had was related to the SARC. For Corcoran High School, the repair status of interior inspected was reported as good on the SARC, but on the FIT report, it stated fair. The discrepancies were caused because the district said they had made the repairs on the interior, but unfortunately we didn't have any documentation to support those repairs. And because there was a difference and the SARC was showing better, we had to report it as a finding. That has no fiscal impact, it's just a finding. And then our last finding was related to the ACES program. The district contributed less than 1/3 of the total state grant as cash or in-kind local funds. So the district contributed $192,591 and the requirement was $208,842, causing the district to be out of compliance with state requirements. Again, with the ACES funding, there's no fiscal impact. We just have to report it as a finding because the state audit guide tells us to. Then we have, after our findings, we have the management letter, which kind of just gives us an opportunity to discuss some things that we found during the audit that we didn't feel were severe enough to be considered a finding or a significant deficiency, but we wanted to bring them to management to help improve the accounting procedures. And we had some comments related to the cafeteria revenues, the journal entries, and student body revenues. And that's all I have for the audit report itself. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. One thing to note, the other paper you guys have in front of you, in addition to the audit report, that's the governance letter. And that just basically details out what our responsibilities are and we're required to give that to you. And if we don't do a board presentation, but we make it our standard procedure to get it to you guys, just in case. So if you have any questions. Okay, well, thank you.
Final entry plan.
Yes, good evening, Board President De La Fuente, members of the board, staff that are here, and community if they're watching. Good evening, Board President, and board, thank you so much. First, I want to just say thank you for giving me this opportunity to serve our great district of Corcoran, Joint Unified School District. It's definitely been an honor to serve in the last, since February. And each day I'm humbled by the responsibility of the role the superintendent has for the 3,300 students and over 400 staff which make up our district. The first 100 days or so, or actually a bit less than that, have been nothing short of amazing. So I want to thank you for being great partners in the work. And there's a lot of work to be done, and you're going to see that today. But I just wanted to just reiterate that to each of you. So today, the purpose for this entry plan is really for me to kind of complete it, close up the loop, right? Which was part of the commitment that I had to you as I was coming in. And so we're going to look at the purpose of the entry plan, why we need to be intentional, look at some data, current reality, and then findings and next steps. So the purpose of the plan, again, is really just there, right? It's to have intentional and inclusive activities that involve everybody and really allow me as the incoming superintendent to take a good pulse of what's happening in our district. And so there's overarching outcomes there, and I'm going to list all those. But one of the key ones at the bottom is through this work, it's setting the foundation for the community-driven strategic plan that we'll be working on this year for 25-26 and the future. And so this work is very important in order to do that work. Again, here's a process for the plan. So back in, I left the reporting dates at the bottom. They didn't necessarily align because of just the way we place them on the board meetings. But I went ahead and recall I've come a couple of times to kind of give updates on this. And this is the final one, which it was supposed to be June 15th, but it's today's June 26th. And so the goal is really to ensure that it's both inclusive and transparent, and that we try to honor as many voices as we could, right, as we're looking through this and looking at the health of the system. So why we need to be intentional. So you've seen this slide before. I'm not going to take long to go over this, but this quote by Deming is super important, right? Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it does. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to ensure that our desired needs to move from the left, which is the individual pockets of excellence, right? We want to make sure that we've operated in that way many a times, but we really want to move to system success, which are on the right. And really looking at how our system is designed is really looking at the data, and we're going to do that tonight. Again, you've seen this and noticed that we're beginning to use the same slides in all of our presentations. This is to provide clarity. So a lot of times you might wonder, like, why does it keep on using these slides? We're using them also with our staff and our community. So it really begins to give some consistency as to why we're doing what we're doing. Each of us play a role in our student success. I'm going to go a little bit deeper on this in a few minutes. Okay. So here's our why we exist. It's our students, right? We're here each and every day to ensure that they're successful. Remember when we had graduations and promotions and all those things, and how great was it to just shake those students' hands, see the smiles on their faces, or even when we did the Alt Ed one and we heard that mom who, had life struggles, but at the end was able to graduate. That's why we're here. And so it was so important that we really look at them every time we do something. Their success is what drives our work each and every day. Our team, right, who some of them are here today, as I've come to know them more closely, they're student focused. And that's one thing that I appreciate about them is they're always asking and saying, is this really great for our students? I want to thank the board because you did an amazing job of really being courageous in your leadership to declare these priorities that you see up here. These are important because they are the cornerstone of what we do. We wouldn't be able to even begin a plan without first getting the guidance, those North Stars from you. And so not every board of education throughout the state or even the nation has these. So I just want you to know that. Or they're not necessarily lived. So what you're going to see in all of our presentations is this in each slide deck. And it's really to remind everybody that these are our 3 priorities, right? And so I want to thank you for that. They are our what, but they're also our why, right? So we're going to dig into a little data. So during the entry plan, one of the things that I had on was analysis, right? And looking at data. And so we reviewed our data to get a better understanding of our current reality. So this is only one data set that I looked at. We're going to go through 2 of them tonight. It's going to be really quick. And what we see here is this is data for the Cusd, the end of year assessment that students take in grades 3 through 8 and 11. And so this is an overview of that data. And if we look at the data on the surface, we have made gains. So on top, that's 2014-15. That was the first year that we tested. Okay. So if you remember that time, that's what we had. So at that time, 21% of all of our students in grades 3 through 8 and 11 were at grade level or above, okay? And in math, 11% were at grade level or above in all those grades, right? So we're gonna look at ELA, that's English Language Arts. That's what I taught, right, for 10 years. And so on the bottom, that's 22-23. Now 31%, 31.2% of our students overall are at grade level or above. But that means that 70% of our students still aren't, right? Okay. But there's growth, so there's some 10% growth which you want to celebrate. However, we also need to look more directly at look more closely at the data, because if we celebrate only on the surface, on the average, it might actually give us a false positive, and so that's what we're going to look at. So this is a chart that's a stack graph that shows how each grade level did in English Language Arts over the last 10 years. Okay, so 2014-15 is the bottom of the stack column, and the closest year 22-23 is at the top. What you notice is that, remember that growth, that 10% growth from 21% to 31% or so, the high school's carrying that load for the most part. Okay, if you look at English ELA 11, that's where majority of that's at. Okay, and that's where we got the growth. But if you look at every other grade, it's pretty stagnant or pretty consistent. There's not a lot of growth, or there's some regression. Okay, so that's something for us to look at, right? And that's something we are looking at now. If we look at the next slide, I kind of put it in a way to visualize what it would look like in a classroom. If we look at the data within the classroom, this is what we see. So this is a classroom of 24 students. What does it mean for 31% of our students to actually be on grade level or above? It would actually be a third of the class, which looks like that. The students that are in the green boxes, that's how many students we would see in each class in grades 3 through 8 and 11 being on grade level or above. Okay. I want to dig down one more level, English learners. If we look at English learners in 22-23 and how they fared on the Cusd in English Language Arts, 1.44% of English learners are on grade level. So if we look at a class of 24, this is what it would look like. Okay. And the last one we'll look at is special education. So special education students in English Language Arts, 10.27% of special education students are meeting grade level proficiency or above. This is what it looks like in a classroom. 2 students in a classroom of 24 are actually meeting grade level. Okay. And so again, we have the positive in the sense that we've had growth over time overall, but when we start to dig deeper, there are definitely room areas for growth. right? So we're gonna look at math, kind of the same thing. So I'll kind of go through this a little bit faster. In math, we have fewer students actually growing because we had 11% and then we moved to 16. So we had about a 5% growth in 10 years. Okay, in 10 years. And so when we look at the stack graph, which is similar to the ELA one, what we see is that actually grades 3 and 4, you know, and they're almost, if you kind of look at them, they're all the same, right? As far as their proficiency rates, they're all kind of stagnant. Okay, and that's why we didn't see a lot of growth there. Even in high school, right? High school as well didn't really carry the load like it did in English, if you notice. Okay, so let's look at it, what it looks like in a classroom. The current reality for the math, for this past year in 22-23, because we have the scores for this year, but they're embargoed and they're not ready to be shared because the state will do some cleanup around it. And so, but if we looked at last year, we stepped into a classroom last year, 4 students in a class of 24 would actually be on grade level for math. Okay. If we looked at English learners, 7.37% would actually be on grade level, about 1.5 students. Okay. And if we look at special education, they actually did a little bit better in math than they did in ELA, 11%, almost a percentage point more, but it'd be about 2.5 students in a class would actually be meeting at grade level or beyond. All right, so that definitely shows that there is definitely a need to really focus on instruction, right? But when we look at a student, we just don't look at the student as an academic, you know, individual, right? Because they're also a person. So we also look at how do they feel in school, right? So when we look at when we looked at the plan and looking at the data that I'm going to share with you, it also includes recommendations around not only academic but also SEL data, because we have to make sure that we're looking at how our students' perception of their learning in our classrooms. So Ms. Mendoza gave us a presentation on panorama data last meeting, so I'm not going to go like, you know, really deep in it, because I just wanted to highlight a couple of things and highlight our voices of our students and teachers. So both students, teachers, and even family took this survey. The questions weren't necessarily like matching, but what I try to do is take a couple of questions that are similar and kind of see the results, right? So if we look here, students were asked, how much respect do students at your school show you? About 39% responded favorably, meaning that they said that students respect them. However, 61% feel that they don't. Okay, and so that is something that we need to work on. We also look at the teacher question at the bottom. Overall, how positive is the working environment at your school? 45%. Okay, so we have 55% of teachers feeling that there's not a positive environment. But when we look at the student data that's above, there's also respect, right? So those correlate. And then when we look at the academic data, right, of less than a third of the students actually meeting grade level, then that also correlates, because our students frustrated, those type of things, because they cannot read or do math or whatever the case would be, then we get the outcomes that we get, right? Okay, so when we look at the data, the next question is overall, how much do you feel like you belong to your school? About 49% feel like they belong, whilst 51% don't, right? There's a disconnect. When we look at the question, how positive are the attitudes of your colleagues? 39% of students said that their colleagues' attitudes are positive. So those all correlate, right? So when we look at the data, it's not just this that we looked at, but this is just a highlight of it. It's what is the perception and the feeling of folks at the schools and mainly the students, and then does that have an impact on the results academically? And so that's what we began to look at, right, and really dig deep into this. So I want to thank the board because you actually allowed us to make this investment in Panorama, right, to be able to dig deeper into this data. And I'll let you know that this year, when teachers get back in August, they're going to be digging deep into this data with their principals, okay, to really begin to look at why is it that we have the numbers that we do. But also the principals will also meet with teachers, with students, with classified staff, and even parents to begin to dig deep and see Why is it that we're getting these results? So it's not that this data just lives here once, it's gonna be an ongoing thing, okay? Our focus needs to be students, but we must set the conditions for our teachers to have the tools and skills needed to support our students. Okay, this small data set shows that we have a long way to go in our journey, right? And what I always say is it's really a marathon, it's not a sprint, okay? And because we're talking about system change. So again, I'm gonna just refer back to this. Remember that every system is perfectly designed to get the results it does. And we just saw results, right? We saw results on the academic side, we saw results on the social emotional side. So those are results that we're getting. And those are results, except for the social emotional, those academic results are over 10 years. It's not a 1-year thing, right? And so we have this operation of individual pockets of excellence, but we really want to get to the right, which is all arrows pointing in the same direction. But we need to have shared goals. We need to have shared strategies, and we need to have shared actions, right? And it has to be student focused, really has to be that. So, and what gives us that North Star starts off with the priorities, which you guys all did, so I'm really thankful again for that. I want to share this quick quote from AJ Crabbill, who's a former trustee and a coach for school boards all over the nation. So this guy wrote a book, it's called Great on Their Behalf, and he summarizes the purpose of a district, right? And so I'll read it as you kind of look up there, it's there in front of you. School systems only exist for one reason, to improve student outcomes, not for adult outcomes, not for adult inputs, not for student outputs. School systems only exist to improve student outcomes. All other activities should be in service of that sole reason to exist, which is to ensure that each student, regardless of what they come in with, is the focus of what we do, right? And so, and research shows that, right? If we are not focused on students, but we're focused on everything else, then our students will be the ones to not bode well, right? So if we look at what we've said, what's been said throughout the research that I've done in my entry plan, again, we're operating this individual pockets of excellence, but what's the root causes? And so I ask folks questions like, what are you proud of when you think about Corcoran? And what do you brag about Corcoran Joint Unified School District? What are we doing right? What do we need to improve on, right? And the one thing that kept on coming up time and time again was that there is a lack of clarity. A lack of clarity on mission, on vision, on systems, processes, and procedures, and roles and responsibilities. And because of that, the result is that there's a loss of focus on student outcomes. So this kind of creates frustration. It's a feeling of not meeting any goals and a sense of isolation. When you're in a pockets of excellence, when you're one of these arrows that's doing really well, right? You know that you're doing well, but you get frustrated because people around you aren't. And you feel like I'm carrying the load for everybody else, right? And that creates frustration. It also tends to feel like when I was kind of thinking through this work as I was doing this, do you guys remember, like my daughter likes to go to John's Grill Pizza, and they have this game, it's called Whack-A-Mole, and you kind of like have this hammer and you're like boom, 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 and the moles pop up. It kind of feels like that sometimes. When we're not focused on students, if we don't have shared goals, shared vision, shared purpose, all those things that's not around students, and things pop up, and we're really kind of addressing kind of these random one-off things, right? It feels that way, and people begin to feel lost, and they feel that, you know, there's a high sense of frustration. And so there were comments like, we're testing too much, why? You know, this is happening, why, right? And discipline's not working, why? And so instead of focusing on how is it they're going to support students, what we focus on is how is it helping the adult, right? But not necessarily how's it helping the student. And so that's where, you know, it feels that way. It also feels like there's an old story about a young Danish boy who goes up to a dam and tries to plug a hole, right, with his finger. And the next thing you know, another kind of water spout pops out and he plugs another one. And the next thing you know, he has all his fingers in, and it just keeps on going. Because now what they're addressing is not the root cause, what's behind it, the pressure of the water, right? And so it begins to feel that way. And so the moles or the holes in these images are in the form of individual complaints, adult-centered issues. It could be a lot of things, right? That really take our focus away from what is most important, students. Okay, and are we, as a system, asking ourselves, are these moves gonna help students, or are they helping anybody else than students, right? The result is we have to lose our focus on student outcomes. If the result is if we lose our focus on student outcomes, then our students are the ones who are neglected, right? And we'll continue to get the results that we do. So when we look at this is why this wheel is so important. When our commitment and focus is on students, when it's on students and supporting adults to support students, we stay aligned. We stay like this circle here, okay? And everybody has a role, right? And so the board, you built the conditions and the what, you created the priorities. It's what are the things that you need to focus on, right? That then goes to the district and we're the how. How is that gonna actually happen, right? And it get implemented. And then at that point, it sets conditions for the school leaders, the teachers and staff, and finally the students, and making sure that they're successful. But when we begin to focus on everything other than students, this circle begins to break away. And those arrows begin to just float around. And no longer are they aligned, but they're misaligned. Okay, and that's where, in talking to a lot of folks, that's kind of what they felt, right? Remember I shared with you the feedback, there was a lot of disconnects and a lot of misalignment, and where are we going? We have to focus on students and what's right for students, right? And that's what was one of the big findings. So I'm just gonna give you a quick update again. So I had 27 listening sessions, over 260 participants. Here's a brief look at the level of engagement that we had in developing the entry plan, right? So there's all of this voice, right, in this plan. Students, here's pictures here. In the meeting greets, I was already collecting data. So community leaders, we had them, I think I don't know the proper term, but maybe the mayor pro temp or the vice mayor was there, and some of the council members, and even like community leaders. I met with students, a lot of students, met with district leaders, met with teachers. Remember, I opened up my calendar and sat at sites and said, hey, whoever wants to come talk to me for one-on-one, the comment was, we have never had this. No one has ever, the superintendent has never come to sit with me just to hear me, right? And the 3 questions I asked was always the same. What do you brag about corporate, Joint Unified School District? What can we do better? And anything else you want to tell me, right? That was it. And from that, all this information was gathered. So also, even as I was here one night after a board meeting, this kind of picture in the corner, bottom corner, our custodian that cleans up at night, she was in the hallway working, and I said, you know what, I haven't met with you. How many night custodians are there? She was, there's about 7 of us. And I said, can you set up a time where we can connect? I'll get lunch, whatever the case may be, dinner, and then we meet. And so we had a meeting, and they provided feedback too. So no group was left unnoticed or unheard, right? And then of course there's you in the corner, upper right hand corner, that night was very historical and instrumental because you developed the 3 priorities, which is super important, right? And then the bottom middle is the culminating meeting that we had about a month ago, where we had students, parents, community leaders all come together to kind of listen to the same findings and provide feedback. And it was pretty much validating what was already kind of established, that there needed to be some clarity, right? That there needed to be systems, processes, procedures, that we needed to focus on students. And so, and that there needed to be a lot of communication. And so that was kind of what was gathered from there. So with that, we can look at the big themes. They're kind of summarized this way, right? Clarity, where are we going? So think of it as a journey. Remember I said it's a marathon, not a sprint. So people want clarity. They want to know, where are we going? Well, thankfully to you, the board, you provided that through the priorities, okay? But now it's how are we getting there? What are those systems, processes, and procedures that we need to put in place in order to draw out the map on how we're going to get there, right? Okay. The accountability is, how will we know we're there, where we are? Because we need to make sure that we have these kind of checkpoints to make sure we're getting to that destination. And part of that, and I've said this to the board, that we will do quarterly updates to you on how we're progressing through this work, okay? And the last thing is communications. How will we share where we are? One of the big things that came up time and time again was the need to communicate. at all levels. And so whether it was with parents, with students, with internally with staff, there was just like a big disconnect in communication. And so it's finding ways to be able to do that more effectively. So I just want to just highlight a couple of things. I'm almost done on this, and these are the appreciative things. There's a lot of great things that are happening in our district. So I just wanted just to highlight a few. Our community of Corcoran cares deeply for the success of our students, right? We have amazing staff who are from, a lot of them are from here or they're graduates from Corcoran, and they care. They love on our kids, right? And so it's just amazing to see that. But also the community as a whole wraps around the school district, which is amazing, right? We have many teachers in classified who are giving their all each and every day, right? It's the conditions, it's the skills and the tools that they need that we need to be able to provide. We have a board which is courageous enough to declare priorities and expectations for themselves through the board handbook and the priorities that you developed. That's super important. Not a lot of boards have that. And so just want to, you know, again, that's very good testament to your leadership. We have developed commitments and expectations for our site leaders and district leaders. So this, back in the beginning of June, once we were all said and done, we took the priorities that you had developed and we said, what is our commitment to those priorities as leaders? And what are the expectations? And so we are finalizing that into a one-page document that will codify what the expectations and commitments are. That's key because you cannot have accountability without clearly defined expectations and commitments. And so one of the things that not only you as a board have asked for in accountability, but even the community has, is we need to define that first. What are those commitments and expectations? And so in August, when we return, I'm going to share that with the board, and you're going to see this is what we designed as a group, and this is our commitment to each other, but also commitment to our district, right? And so that's very key. And one of the big pieces of feedback from that, and I surveyed the leaders, was that they had a lot more clarity on what their role was. And so remember before there was a lack of clarity. So being able to give them that is super important. So the last couple of things is our high school is becoming one of the best in the county and the valley. You know, we need to celebrate that. You know, they still have a lot of work in math, but you know, I'm really holding my tongue on the data for this coming year that we just had, because if everything works out the way it is, we're gonna have some surprises, right? And we're gonna celebrate that. But we're not only gonna celebrate the high school, but we're gonna celebrate teachers throughout all the schools who have done well, because we need to do that as well, right? Because we have, again, teachers that are doing well. And then the last thing is our students have a desire to be challenged to learn. Remember when Mr. Mendoza was up here and she was giving the student feedback? And also when I talked to students, they didn't say, I don't want to come to school. What they were saying is, I want to be challenged in school. There's a big difference. And so being able to have that from students is amazing, right? And when you think about all the students that we saw, the high school students on graduation night, remember when Mr. Larkin said, how many of you have completed a college course? I mean, I don't know, it was way more than 2/3 of them stood up. Right? They want to be challenged, but they want to be challenged even at the earliest levels, right? And we have to build that mindset in, but are we focused on students, right? And so areas of growth, we need to have a laser-like focus on students and their success. That has to be, as a system, our main priority. And what happens is in many districts, and I've been in a few, right? Not many, but enough. When there's competing interests, right, that moves our vision away from students, then we get the results that we get. But if it's really about, is what people are asking for students, or is it for themselves? That's the question that we need to ask every time that we're doing something. And not just here in this room as a unified governance team, but even as I'm working with our leaders, asking the same question. Is what you're asking for best for students, or is it best for someone else, right? And so that's an area of growth for us. We need to establish foundational elements such as a vision, mission, systems, processes, and procedures. Those are lacking, and you'll hear a little bit more tonight from our next presenter around that. We need to bring clarity to each partner's roles and responsibilities from the board to the classroom, right? We understand those, that we have tights and looses. And so I'll give you one example. If a reading teacher is there to teach reading intervention to students, and the type is that you use this tool, then that needs to be the type, right? And because we know that that tool has success. But if what they're doing on their own does not have success, we cannot have that because we're gonna get the same results that we do, right? Because it's not about students, but it's about everything else, right? And we need to make sure that we're there. The hard part is, the rub is that when you get accountability in place, that begins to, that becomes create some uneasiness. But we need to be able to be focused on students. That's the most important thing. We also, we need to develop tools to measure and monitor the effectiveness of our work, the accountability. We have Panorama, which you all have, given, the approval of, and we're using it. But we don't have really good systems in place to look at data from the academic standpoint. That's why tonight in your agenda, there's a piece around Parsec that gives us that opportunity for teachers to look at data from academics to discipline and attendance at the student level. And teachers to use that in their professional learning communities so they can make data-driven decisions around student needs. Right now, that's not happening. And so we have time every week where teachers are supposed to work together, right? After school, early start or late start or early release. However, data is not always being used. Okay, or that time is not clearly defined, and that's the types that we're working to develop for next year. The next thing is we need to be intentional about engaging every ed partner in authentic and meaningful interactions to support student success. That's the priority 3 for all of you that you guys identified. It's not about a game. It's about really digging deep to have that authentic engagement with folks. And that's where you're going to see us go. And the last one is we need to tell our story to regain the narrative of our district and community. There are great things happening in our district. Is there a lot of room for growth? Yeah. But there are also great things happening. And so we need to be able to be intentional about telling that story. Because at the end of the day, what drives economic development in our community is our schools. Because when industry is looking, where am I going to put my business? The one thing that they look at, one of the major things they look at is how are our schools doing? And they pull up the sports. And they pull up the what sports are there and what activities and all those things, right? And they see, if I put my business here, will that attract people to live here and work here, right? And that's really the connection, the partnership that we have with the city. Because after that, then they look at what is the permits and everything else and how you build, and are they gonna help us out with all those other things that are not to my purview, but those are the 2 things that they look at: schools and how can they work with the city. And so we drive that economic force here in Corcoran, and it starts with us, right? So I want to thank you to the board for the investment in the tools that we need to be successful. Again, these priorities are super important. So what we've done is we've taken the priorities that you have, the what, right? And began to identify strategies, that's the how. So if we look into priority 1, we have strategies which analyze and develop systems of support for students to behave successfully, right? We also have supports for staff to have the skills and tools to meet students' social emotional needs. You're going to hear about that tonight, so I don't want to steal the next presenter's thunder, but you're going to hear a little bit about that tonight. In priority 2, we have strategies which focus on instruction P12. We have been disjointed, but now we're aligning our instructional tools to support students academically. I'll give you a quick example of the investment that you made as a board. Before, in our elementary schools, they all use different curriculum for English. Just about a month ago, you approved a contract to align our English curriculum from K to 5th grade. And then the other one was to align English through ERWC from 6th grade to 12th grade. So now we have aligned curriculum, which we didn't have before, okay? The other big piece that you've done as well as a board is allowed us to be able to really look at assessments. And teachers, if you remember, one of the things was we're assessing too much. Well, we've been able to work through Mr. Gent and Ms. Mendoza, work with teachers, leaders, and now we've cleaned up the assessments. There's gonna be a lot less next year, Now, the work for next year is to define which assessment is gonna be the best one to carry on after next year. Okay, which one's gonna give us the best information? And that's what we're gonna do. So we'll come back to you with a contract like probably in April, but it's gonna be around the best assessing tool, right? And so after this, and then in priority 3, we have strategies which provide more authentic and meaningful engagement. So you're gonna see these advisories at schools, okay? And you know, principals report on those. After this presentation, you will hear from our partner, Collaborative Learning Solutions, on their findings and recommendations for our tiered system support. This is key. This is a key investment that the board made to meet the need identified by all stakeholders. And this is our work for 24, 25, and beyond. In year 1, we will focus on foundations and assess where we need to go for the next 3 to 5 years. This work is a marathon, not a sprint. But I'm here today to say that my commitment as your superintendent is to be student-focused, intentional, and that we create that accountability structure so we can know where our students are at, right? Because at the end of the day, we want our students to succeed. So I just wanted just a final thing, just to check, if you're a list person, you know you love to have checks at the end of the list. This was the plan. Everything was checked off and met, right? And so it's really now about taking this one-page document and teasing it out to be able to have the actions necessary to move forward, okay? And so with that said, any questions? I yield my time to the board. Any questions that you might have?
Tiered systems of support and appreciative inquiry review.
Hello, good evening. My name is Manya Paul. I am an educational consultant with Collaborative Learning Solutions. I just want to ensure that you can hear me okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, super. Thank you. You have in front of you the slides, and I know they're being projected there. So our company, Collaborative Learning Solutions, was brought in to support Corcoran Joint Unified School District in terms of looking at their systems around tiered supports. So tiered supports is when we are looking at supporting students at their varying levels of need. So not everybody is performing at grade level. We know this. Mr. Casina has certainly shown that in his presentation with the data. So in tiered supports, what we are doing is we are using data-driven information and determining what does a student need. So all the questions that we asked in this process were around that. Do you want to look at the next slide, which is an overview of the process? This was a 4-step process that involved preparation for the inquiry, where we met with leadership from the district to give them guidance on what type of focus groups to create, on what type of questions we'd be asking, and to better understand what the priorities were for the district. The second phase involved in-person focus groups. I spent 2 days in district. I met with a total of 10 focus groups. I met with everybody from paraeducators who've been in the district 30 years, all the way through to your superintendent and everybody in between. So it was really enjoyable few days getting to know your staff and seeing their incredible commitment to the district. After that process was done, the questions that we asked them, we go through a process of analysis of the information. We're looking for where are your strengths, where are things working well, where might there be areas of need where we can give you recommendations. We're not using only the information that was gathered in those focus groups, but we're also using your ed data that we find and your CASP scores and other documents and information that was shared by district leadership to support the building of the report. The final phase then is the recommendations. Now, what we're going to look at tonight are just the highlights. There's a longer report, I believe, has been shared with the board already. And so we're just going to be focusing on some of the priority areas. Before we go into that, I do want to note that we are partnering with you through the 24-25 school year to work on putting some of these recommendations into place. So if anything seems like it's daunting, know that we're going to be there supporting district leadership as we go through this process. So the next slide represents foundations. Foundations are district structures. So it's things where we're looking at your purpose, your mindset, your values, your goals, looking at what type of teaming structures exist. So who are the teams that are supporting students? What does the communication look like? Where is the commitment within the district? So on the next slide, we see some of the key findings that we found from our focus groups. One of your biggest strengths, and I know Mr. Pacina addressed this, is your staff. You're an incredibly committed staff. I was really impressed. You have kind of two distinct groups within your staff members. You have members who are born and bred in Corcoran, went to Corcoran schools, have lived there their entire lives. Their children went to Corcoran schools, and they just live and breathe the passion for having the best school district they can. Then you have a second group of staff members, and these are staff members who maybe live outside of the town, but live in the region, and they have built their professional experience in other districts, but they are equally committed to bringing what they have learned from other districts into Corcoran and helping Corcoran build itself into the best district that it can be. And they have a little bit differing perspectives, but I feel like they're both an incredibly strong part of your foundation, and it really is an amazing strength that you have as a district. We go down a little bit more into the minutia. One of the key things when we look at tiered supports and supporting students with interventions is who is the team that is there supporting the students supporting the teachers so that they can support the students. So I think a strength that I saw across your schools is that you do have professionals in place to support your teachers in terms of coaches and resource teachers available at every site. We don't see that in every district. We don't see that in every school. So that is definitely a positive piece that you have there. When we look at the administrative engagement piece, I found a very committed district leadership. I met with them many times, one-on-one in small groups, to really talk about their drive and their goals and visions for the district and what they see in terms of strengthening that system of tiered support. And so without that strong leadership in place, any changes would be very difficult to put in place for the district. Now, looking at recommendations within that, and you've started this, and Mr. Facina referenced this also, but really building that collective why about why do we do this particular process. So you need the why as a district of why are we here supporting students, not just the what we're doing and the how we're doing it, but why is this so incredibly important? We need to define that same type of why when we're looking at these practices, but at the same time building a really strong structure for use district-wide. Like Mr. Casina found in his focus groups, I also heard from staff members, and this was across the board, they lacked some clarity. They needed some better instruction. They needed some better guidelines. They needed some better systems in place. They were confused sometimes on where they needed to go. You have many of the elements you need, but we need to put them into a framework to help them build out and help you drive your students' success. Along with that is developing a plan to make sure you're aligning your personnel and your teams to support this. Now, there was a reference earlier to professional learning communities. Those are incredibly important. I heard pretty consistently in the meetings that they were not being used in the way that they could be used. They still had the name of them, they still existed, but the practices that go along with the professional learning community of sitting down every week and looking at student data and making educational and instructional decisions based on that data seems to be inconsistent and to have wavered in many sites. So you have the foundational piece you need there. We need to strengthen that process and bring it back into what it should be as a professional learning community. The third recommendation within here is I would encourage you to research the effectiveness of the current elementary school configuration to see what impact that has on student success. I'm sure you're well aware that it's a little bit different configuration than is in most districts, and I do completely understand the why that was shared with me by many of the participants within there. As you're looking at that, though, I encourage you to always stay in the forefront. Is this still what's best for our students? Is this still what's best for driving them forward academically and in supporting the community as a whole within that. Okay, we're going to move on to partnerships. So the next slide is that. Partnerships reflect discussion around where your students fit in, where your families fit in, and where your community fits in, and looking at how those partnerships support the school community as a whole. So if we move on to the next slide, we have some findings under each of those. When we refer to agency, we're not just talking about somebody having a voice within the process. We're talking about them being able to impact change. We're talking about that equity piece of being able to be actively engaged within the community. With students, we saw that they have a lot of opportunity to participate in clubs and sports and activities such as 4-H and FFA, that those were well established, especially for the older students in place. For families, I know the schools work hard to offer opportunities to engage families coming in with literacy nights and open houses and working to support the families in supporting their students and their educational careers. Your bilingual community contact positions, I thought, were an excellent strength to note for you, being able to make sure that all of your families can engage with the school community is incredibly important, and being able to engage in their native language is incredibly important. It really builds the unity within that. I will note to you that I have worked as a bilingual school psychologist for a number of years, and I saw firsthand what a difference that makes when you are able to work without an interpreter or a translator and supporting families. And so I applaud you for recognizing that and prioritizing that within your school personnel, because it does truly make a difference. In looking at your community agency, another area that I felt was a very, very big strength for you, it was clear your community is very, very engaged in supporting the school district. I heard about activities with mental health awareness walks and the Lions Club and Kiwanis and all the many things that they do wrapping around in terms of supporting the school district. And of course, the incredible amount of support received from the Recreation Association of Corcoran. That was definitely a very positive point brought up repeatedly throughout the 2 days, how appreciative staff were for that partnership and the work that they do with their students. So we're looking at some of the key recommendations. I want to make sure as you're looking at policies and you're looking at communicating with families that you are including the school-wide expectations and that multi-tier system of support process in your student and family handbooks. Those of you who are familiar with that system and that terminology, you may remember seeing a triangle that shows that most of the students are at the base of the triangle and performing at grade level. And then as you go up and the triangle gets narrower, there are smaller and smaller groups of students needing a higher level of support. Teachers know this triangle, right? They've seen this. We want to make sure that as you're communicating with families, that they understand what the supports are available to their students, and that starts to become part of their vocabulary and part of their vernacular within that. Examine why some families do not engage in offered opportunities. Now, we know as parents, those of us who have had children in public schools, sometimes life gets in the way. There are economic pressures, there are time pressures, there are a lot of reasons why families aren't participating in school offered opportunities. But check on it. Maybe there's a lack of understanding. You have these amazing bilingual community contact positions. Ask them, see what they are hearing from families and seeing what is being missed there. Are there too many activities at too many different schools? Maybe somebody has students at 3 different elementary schools and they don't want to go to literacy night at 3 different elementary schools or open houses at 3 different schools. That might be a reason to explore. Maybe there are other reasons. But as you're talking to the community, and especially as board members, as you're out and about and you're engaging with them, ask families if there are barriers there that maybe the district doesn't know about and that can be addressed to support their continued engagement in the school. The final section The next slide, common assurances. This reflects inclusivity, evidence-based practices, your curriculum, how you align your personnel and resources across schools, and of course, the incredibly important data and assessment piece. So as we look at the findings and the recommendations there, evidence-based practices, and I heard in the prior presentation, you are already looking at this, but we heard in the focus groups that you have some evidence-based curriculum, but there was a lack of continuity of the curriculum from site to site. So it sounds like that's already being resolved, and that was a concern that was brought up. A strength that you have within there in your alignment of personnel and resources is your weekly release time. Now, I know Kings Canyon does not have that. They don't have the weekly release time, but all the other schools do. And that is a wonderful time to really use that professional development and that collaboration time around tiered practices, a time when those professional learning communities can be meeting, and a time when administration can be supporting the learning of teachers so that they can better support their students academically. And of course, in data and assessment, the district assesses the students at least quarterly on core academics. And I know it was shared that they are looking at refining that, and that will be more refined this coming year. That data being a critical piece within any type of tiered process, because it is all data driven. It's not, well, I think the student needs help. It's like, okay, the student scores are here. We know that student needs help. So helping you to build that process within there. So the key recommendations are developing a multi-year structure for the implementation of the tiered supports, and including identifying any personnel to lead the process. I always prefer not to recommend adding personnel, but you really need to consider where are you in terms of personnel to lead this. This is a big process, and it is not something that you've had going in a robust manner in the past, or at least in the recent past. So you will want to consider where personnel fit into that. In terms of your curriculum, you are already starting on this. Standardize the use of evidence-based curriculum and screeners across educational levels. When you're using one screener at one level and then a different one at a different level, it's really hard to compare. Is the student making growth as they move from, second grade to third grade, or third grade to fourth grade, and where are there areas of need? So really looking at that standardization is important to simplifying the process and losing less time in trying to decipher data. Whereas if it's all the same, you can look at it much more easily. Develop a sustainable plan for funding, training, coaching, and of course, supporting the fidelity of everything that we've been talking about. Knowing that funding is always a challenge in a school district, but recognizing that if you don't have that long-term plan, you're going to end up with one more temporary project that then falls by the wayside. And so when we work with districts, we are very specific in discussing how do you create sustainability? How in 5 years do we make sure the work you're doing is still working just as well as it is when we are finished with our part in supporting you? So that's a very critical piece in maintaining that. And of course, a communication plan is needed. I heard a lot of challenges with communication across the district. Some of that was touched on by Mr. Pesina in terms of they're not really sure what they're supposed to be doing. They're not sure what's happening over here, who is responsible for it, needing some clarity within that. They did note, and I will say this, and it's not included in these slides, that they were very appreciative of the things that Mr. Pesina has put into place since he's arrived in terms of trying to improve some of that communication. They love the summary of the board meetings that comes out to them and such. So continuing along that path of supporting a strong communication process within there is important to building a strong system. And then finally, your roles and next steps. So we have a little bit for everybody. Everybody has something to do whenever we are trying to improve processes. Board, your job is to do any policy changes as they're needed, as that's requested of you, to look at that and consider that and to put those into place. District administration, your job is to, manage the identification and organization of personnel and curricular resources, and then supporting all the educators below that into implementing these practices. Families, your job is to get your kids to school every day and on time, and to participate in the school community events as frequently as possible. Students, their job is to show up prepared and be ready to engage daily. And community, I say continue to engage with and support the school community as it has been shared with me that you have been doing, and is really a strength for Corcoran with that. So thank you. I welcome any questions you might have. And that's all.
We don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Report, superintendent report.
Yes, good evening, Board President De La Fuente, members of the board. Be real brief. First, I want to thank Dr. Paul for her presentation, and you saw a lot of alignment on what's happening. And we really were inclusive of hearing as many people's voices as possible. So I just want to thank her. And we're going to take that report, and that's going to be priority one. So those recommendations become the actions to that strategy around tier system support. So there's a longer piece, right, that you have, but that gives us the meat behind the what, right? This becomes the how. So I want to thank her for that. Also, tonight, just real quick, I know hopefully there's some people watching out there. We have Mr. Steve Berry, and I know we celebrated him the other day, but you know, we have him for one more day after this. And so I just want to just again, from myself as a superintendent, I know for many others, we just want to thank you for all of the commitment you had with our community. And I have, you know, also extended the opportunity to always come back and support and help in any way, shape or form. And then we have our new director of IT, Mr. Adam Houston, here tonight. So thank you for being here. And so again, Mr. Berry, just, you know, congratulations. And, you know, I know you'll be enjoying a lot of travels and whatnot. So
Speed, let's go.
yeah. And then the last thing is, you know, we have summer school going on, it's almost done. And so we have students at different sites. And so it's just great to see them there. High school students working in the TLC, and, you know, students at the middle school and elementary school. So it's just great to see them all there and engaged. And again, our partners at the RAC that continue to provide that for folks as well. And so that we have that opportunity to have that partnership. Lastly, I just want to just note to the public that we will be taking a hiatus in July. And so, but you know, we'll come back in August for a meeting then, I believe. And so, but we will make sure that people are aware when those meetings occur, so they're able to access them. And with that, I yield my time.
Thank you. Board of Trustees. Corporate Faculty Association, CFA.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Roseanne Salcido, Corcoran Faculty Association President. School year's over and teachers are finishing up summer school. Some teachers have also been working on essential standards this month, and several will be returning to work next month in order to prepare for the upcoming school year. Teachers literally never stop working for our students of Corcoran. The data provided today about state test scores was pretty interesting. Thank you for the update. I do encourage you, though, to look at 7th grade ELA. You can't see me right now, but I'm winking my left eye, you know, because I do teach 7th grade. And also, CFA agrees with Mr. Pacina about focusing on students. So to ensure a good start in August, there's a few issues that teachers are concerned about, and we would like to resolve them in order to improve our upcoming school year. So the first one we want to talk about is teachers have requested lockdown kits for each classroom. We've had a number of lockdowns this past school year, and we need to be prepared for any long, unforeseen lockdowns in the future. The second thing teachers would like to see is an improvement in attendance, and that was mentioned in the report actually, and prevent the excessive tardy issues at each site. And that's not just at the beginning of the school day, it is during the school day as well. Parents need to be made accountable for bringing their student to school every day and on time, and encouraging their student to attend class on time as well. Teachers would like to see effective discipline solutions for students who are creating an unsafe environment for other students and staff. Safety is of the utmost importance in and out of the classroom for everyone. The next thing I want to mention is that John Muir has a growing population with 3 grade levels. There are definitely not enough, nor a number of adequate classrooms or admin or counselors to service all of our students. We have 1 counselor for approximately 800 students, and I'm sure we're out of compliance with providing proper and desperately needed counseling services for our middle school students. The well-being and safety of our students at John Muir are at stake. It's the end of June. We're all in need of a much needed break. I know I need one. Have a great summer, and I will see you all in August. Thank you for your time, Corcoran Faculty Association.
Thank you. California School Employees Association, CSEA.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. So good evening, board members and administration. Dulce Sandoval, CSEA Chapter President. I hope everyone is staying cool as summer has officially begun and the triple-digit heat is here to stay. Summer school is on its last week and classified staff ran into some issues with the district and their summer work contracts. The lack of communication brought forth some issues that could have been avoided had the district reached out to myself and our union, and we had collaborated before the summer session began, so that questions and concerns could have been sorted out. Due to the lack of communication is that classified staff that volunteered to work summer school have felt like once again they don't matter, and the district did not keep their word. So don't be surprised if next year you have fewer classified staff willing to volunteer to work summer school. Vacant positions. We still have a couple of vacant positions in our unit, but the numbers have gone down since the last board meeting. Once again, we can't stress the importance that these positions be filled before the beginning of the school year, so there are no interruptions in coverage or additional work placed on already overworked employees. As Mr. Pacina initiates his new 24-25 district plan and changes are made to improve the culture and communication within the sites and district-wide, I would like to propose that the board and the superintendent look to surveying the staff at each school site or the staff that the administrator or supervisor oversee, so that accurate feedback can be provided when it comes to their yearly evaluations. The superintendent visits 2 to 3 times a year are not sufficient or an accurate gauge of how that administrator or supervisor is doing. Who better to provide the feedback than the staff they oversee? This will provide a true evaluation rather than a very vague and generalized one. Several other districts I know survey the staff yearly for their administrator and supervisor evaluations. I know Hanford Joint High District does this. If we truly want to see data that the changes and the plan are working, then this should also be implemented. Who better than the staff to provide true and accurate feedback? Negotiations with the district for the reclass process. Sorry, there's an airplane right above me. Negotiations with the district for the reclass process has not gone as we expected. We went in with an open mind and hopeful that the district would at least negotiate, ask questions, and would have professional dialogue, but so far that has not been our experience. Our team is very disappointed in how the district has treated this process, but we hope that when we do meet again, that the importance of the reclass process and the full review of the package will be given the time and attention they deserve. Thank you, and I hope you all have a wonderful and restful summer. We look forward to starting off the next school year with a positive, open mindset and with the realization that classified staff do matter and the work we provide is needed and deserving of recognition. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment? Action items, consent agenda. With the elimination. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the elimination of staff trip number 2? I motion to approve. I will second.
Oh, question. 6-2, what are we doing with that? How does that affect anything? Is that just like a generalization motion or what are we doing?
For 6.2, she motioned to remove it from the, so it'll be approved without that. Yeah,
Or the motion, we just remove it?
yes. So it's to approve the rest of the consent without that.
Thank you.
No.
Roll call. Valerie? Aye. Teresa? Aye. Sammy?
Aye.
And I. Pupil personnel, consider the approval of an interdistrict transfer from Tulare City School District for student A to attend Corcoran Joint Unified School District for the 2024-25 school year.
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second. Any discussion? Roll call. Valerie? Aye. Teresa? Aye. Sammy?
Aye.
And I. Consider the approval of an interdistrict transfer for student A and B to attend Wakena Unified School District for the 2024-25 school year. Do I have a motion? Any discussion?
I couldn't find that in the package. Does anybody know what page that is?
I was actually trying to look for that.
Should have been before the handbook.
Yeah, it's before I scroll 2 points.
Yes, and I had a problem trying to find it. I could not find it. What page? Okay.
37 is the. Yeah, that's Tulare. Yeah, it's not. So they want to table it till the next.
By the time we table it, though, we'll be already in school session, so how are we going to handle that?
GS not here for us to pull that document, Bill C. But mainly when they're transferring from here to Wakena, it's at the end of it's usually like 7th grade, 8th grade, somewhere around there, they're doing that. I just don't remember seeing this, on top of my head.
I'm not gonna vote on something I don't have paperwork.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make a motion to table it.
Okay.
And I'll second. Roll call. Valerie? Aye. Teresa? Aye. Sammy?
Aye.
And I. Administration, discuss and review board policy 1250 visitors outsiders.
I'd like to have some review on that with the legal and maybe, have them help develop a new policy on that.
Yeah, definitely. I did send an update to the board this afternoon because we did get kind of legal weighed in on it. What they basically stated was that the policies as they are, both 1240 and 1250, are the standard CSBA policy, which upholds the stringent guidelines around the legal components of it. And so at the very end, it says that, they would more than, if we want to do a committee like we did kind of the it wasn't nepotism, but the employment of a family relative, that we could do the same thing. I think the only difference in the guidance was that they also said that even though if the committee wanted to alter it, their main kind of focus was to ensure that the integrity of the policy stood as a whole because of the laws. Because it's very kind of strict, right? And so,
But reading 627 of the penal code is not really specific.
Yeah.
To gaining entrance, it gives requirements. And it gives reasons for denial, but it doesn't give, and even the Work High School Handbook does not say specifically
No.
what. Or any, other than referring back to 1250. So I think that's where we need to be specific, and when we say they can or cannot come on campus. I mean, of course, if they're gonna disrupt the process, then absolutely not. But 627, I read every single one of those segments. And it does not give specific guidelines for that. It's generalization is what it is.
yeah, normally laws kind of operate that way. They're not gonna give like specificities around like specific activities, that type of thing, because there's so much variance. And I think that's where even, you know, when, and again, I sent it late, so you know, not all of you might have seen it. But they definitely crapped out in that response why there's these kind of components within 1250 and even 1240, which is volunteers, because that also applies. So again, if the board you know, chooses to have a committee, you know, what that committee would comprise of, the last time it was two trustees. The one thing I know I heard loud and clear from the last board meeting was, you know, not like making sure that parents have access to events, right? That's kind of what, you know, in my recollection from the last meeting, which I think is true, right? We want to make sure that parents have access to events, those type of things. That's why in 1250, it lays a process where that, you know, if a parent contacts the school ahead of time, lets them know, hey, this is what's going to be there. And I think that could be like in an AR, or not so much the policy, because the policy is more of the legal part of it. The AR is the how it's implemented. Then that could be there, or just be unified amongst all of the handbooks. We would just need to kind of say what that looks like. Is it the day before the event? Is it, you know what I mean? Like there has to be some kind of thing that way, which would probably be easier to do than if we're going the policy route. Then we're really looking at, does the specificity, you know, change the integrity of the law, right? That's tied to it. So.
And I think that's what I want to see is more of a, because all it says it has to be arranged with the principal or the site administrator. If I walk in 5 minutes before and talk to the site administrator and sign in and show my ID, why would I not be allowed to go in? So I think it's more of a timing process and what that notification should be, whether it has to be a day, whether it has to be 10 minutes before an event, or a week ahead of time. That's more what I was, I don't want to see parents being turned away.
No, definitely. And one of the things I know that we've done, so yes, so I think that is what my recommendation would be, is we look at something in the handbook, something in the AR, right? Which would make more sense than looking at the policy. Because again, the policy is the law, it's the what, and we don't necessarily want to tamper with that piece. So yes, we can look at that and bring that back to the board. I think also what we're doing for this coming year, based on the third priority, is having those kind of intentional engagements with folks. I know last year, Ms. Moreno and team kind of reached out deliberately to try to get more volunteers, and we'll be doing the same thing this coming year, because we want that. We want parents to be volunteering. We also want them to be at certain events. We just need to clarify for them so it's clear. And also for us, like you heard Dr. Paul say, and what was in the findings too for my listening sessions, is communicating that to parents, like notifying them, educating them on if it's a day before, if it's, you know, whatever that we decide, that we're intentional about communicating it out to folks so they understand. Because the last thing we want to do is have something put in place, but people don't understand that it's there or not. So that would be the other piece to this, is a communication plan around ensuring that all families know what that would be.
correct me if I'm wrong, the volunteers have to be fingerprinted and scanned, correct?
Yes.
Visitors do not.
Correct. And that,
I don't understand why, I mean, you mentioned both policies, but we're trying to focus. I understand what volunteering is, you're there with the kids.
Yeah.
You're working with the kids, they need to be clear. The visitor portion is what I'm looking at.
oh yeah, no, definitely understand. The reason why I requested for both 1240 and 1250 is because they have a component that bridges across both. And it's the the notification piece, that was why. But yeah, you're correct that the reason why a volunteer, and I'll just say that just if anybody's watching, is fingerprinted is because they're in space with students for longer periods of time and they might be like, unsupervised, that type of thing, right? A visitor is gonna be there for, an event or something. That's the difference.
For the visitors, would it be possible to put out the activities maybe a week or two in advance and put it out on Parent Square and say, this is your deadline, if parents would like to come and view this event? That way, the parents are aware of it, but if they miss the deadline, then that falls on the parent.
Right, I agree.
Yeah, we definitely want to have, a way, and that's kind of why we moved into a new website even to have like a calendar that's more robust. The company that you approved, parents can actually tie the calendar from the website to their phone. So it actually allows them to get notifications as it's being updated. The one thing I'll caution the board on, in some instances, what happens, and this is every district, because I call like, different districts, throughout the area. So like La Rosti, individual that worked both in Tulare School District as well as Visalia, Sanger, Fresno Unified. Some of the events, because of where they're held, like let's say in the auditorium, there's a capacity issue. So at that point, that's kind of like the determination that the staff also has to make to be able to see, are we able to have, and then it becomes kind of to your point in your scenario, like what happens if even we had 100 slots and like 200 parents want to come, right? So that's a piece where we have to kind of make sure.
Right, but what my thought is on that, I mean, we're pretty much a tech school, so why couldn't we put a Google Doc on it that would be connected to the Parent Square, where the parent comes and it's first come, first served?
Yeah.
And I don't think we're talking 200 people, we're talking maybe 24 at the most.
Yeah.
You cannot get people to come and participate because they feel like they don't want, even if the staff don't want them there, or that they're gonna be denied.
Right.
So, and a lot of people work, they're not going to have that luxury to be there every time.
Right.
But we're not talking 200 people.
Yeah, no, I was saying that,
I understand.
Yeah, scenario,
We're not talking 200 people,
right.
we're talking 24 at the most.
Yeah.
Especially for seniors, when they're having their last rallies or their last, whatever it may be, their awards. Those are the parents that want to come, right? Because that's going to be the last thing they're going to be able to do.
Right.
So I did mention here, it was kind of some inconsistent where, I mean, they were allowed to come and take pictures of the cap and gown. They were allowed to come and view the walkthrough at the Bret Hart. But then when it comes to the last rally, they weren't allowed to see that. And I understand, it was last minute, there's probably just a maybe a few parents who wanted to. But when they're able to attend the other events, it makes it kind of hard as to why not this one? That's why I'm saying it would be nice if we could go on Parent Square and we can have a Google Doc and it's a first come, first serve. If you limit it to 5 parents, limit it to 5 parents, but just that way that they have the opportunity.
Yeah, what we can do, kind of hearing the board, and if you're good with this, is we can go back and kind of craft a couple scenarios and processes that aren't necessarily they're tied to the board policy, but it's more of how we're implementing it. And then we also look at best practice, and I can even work with legal just to kind of see, and even I would think we also need to look at our JPA, because that would be another piece too that we need to kind of get some guidance from. And so and then from those kind of pieces, then we'd be able to bring back a couple recommendations for that. I think would probably be a better solution.
I appreciate looking into it. I mean, on one hand, we have a safety security issue because I know we have parents that just run up in there thinking they created problems. I think we had some issue where a parent actually wanted to fight a student because of an issue that they had with the other kid or something, so. It's kind of a really thin line that we're walking here, where we want to include people, that's our main goal, right? To involve the community and have them come in and be part of the schools and the events. So we're welcoming them, but there has to be guidelines, there have to be processes, and they have to be communicated, and I don't know if it's gonna be requiring a little bit more than a dog, because I know a lot of our families don't have access to internet or websites or anything like that, so it's gonna be a very difficult process to go through, but I think it's well worth the time to invest to look into it.
Yeah, we'll definitely look into it and make sure that we do our due diligence and finding, because those are the other components that we have to keep in mind. Yeah, so we'll look at best practice across the state. I know just in the quick surveying of different districts locally, but we can look and see what potential there is.
Right, because we're also saying that they may not have the technology to do so, and I understand that, but if we're also doing that, then we need to do that for sports and not use GoFund and allow people to pay cash at the gate, because a lot of our seniors aren't tech savvy and do not have that either.
I know I had to have my person in front of me buy my ticket because my phone wasn't allowing me to take a picture of that little thing, so
Yeah,
thank you for that.
that's definitely a different piece, but we can always, yeah, right,
Technology that
Sure.
people don't have.
yeah. Okay, so what I'm, just for clarity purposes, and just for next steps, what I'm hearing is for the team to go back and kind of do some research on what our best practice is. We want to look at, what are a couple different models, also getting feedback from legal and our JPA, because our insurance would also, those are things that we have to do. And then kind of the pieces that everyone has mentioned, those different scenarios that brought up. And then, we get back, because we're gonna start school and that type of thing, and we have a lot of people going on vacation, really to be able to do this work. Definitely want to have, principals, because it'll affect all schools and that type of thing, that we would probably do this work towards. We'll start it, but really bring something back to the board, maybe at the end of September or something like that, just because of getting started with school and stuff. I want to make sure they're focused on students' success at the beginning. Okay, good, thank you.
Consider the approval of the following handbooks: Corcoran Joint Unified School District, Red Heart Preschool, Red Heart John C. Fremont Mark Twain Elementary Schools, John Muir Middle School, Corcoran High School, Kings Lake Education Center and Mission Community Day School.
Motion approved.
I'll second. Any discussion? Roll call. Valerie? Aye. Teresa? Aye. Sammy?
Aye.
And I. Consider the approval of the 2024-25 Local Control and Accountability Plan, LCAP, Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA Federal Addendum. Do I have a motion? A motion to approve. I'll second. Any discussion? Roll call. Valerie? Aye. Teresa? Aye. Sammy?
Aye.
And I. Consider the approval of the 2024-25 Local Performance Indicator Self-Reflection.
Make a motion approved.
I'll second. Any discussion? Roll call. Valerie? Aye. Teresa? Aye. Sammy?
Aye.
And I. Consider the approval of the Regents of the University of California Agreement for Summer Math Academy. A motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call. Valerie? Aye. Teresa? Aye. Sammy?
Aye.
And I. Consider the approval of the Hannigan Equity Group Professional Learning Services proposal contract.
We'll make a motion approved.
I'll second. Any discussion? Roll call. Valerie? Aye. Teresa? Aye. Sammy?
Aye.
And I. Consider the approval of the California School Boards Association quote for gamut meetings. Do I have a motion?
I need a little bit more explanation on it.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been looking at is to kind of move our agenda into the 21st century. So right now our agenda is a PDF, which we're kind of flowing through, page by page. This will allow us to have the agendas online. We're using CSBA, which is a service that many districts use. And it will not only allow all the agenda preparation to be done online, so the cover sheets, the backup, everything else, but then it also gives you a different view as a board member, but also the public. It also makes, I believe, the agendas, it translates them to Spanish. So there's access to our Spanish speakers as well. The other component to it is it has online voting. So right now, when you have your iPad and we're doing President De La Fuente is, second, that type of thing, you actually do it electronically. So it will post up here, but it also captures it in the minutes as well. So it's really to improve the workflow of the agenda development. And this is just something that many districts have gone to online, not just districts, but even civil, governments, city governments and whatnot have gone to kind of an online agenda. So that's what this is. So we looked at 3 platforms and we looked at it even as a cabinet, and this was the one that we felt was the not only most cost effective, but also that aligns with the kind of work that we're doing.
And what's the total cost?
I believe 7,500 for it.
I like the voting. The way we're doing it.
Well, it's the voting and the agenda building, so it's not just the voting piece. So
I'll motion to approve.
I will second. Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie.
Aye.
Teresa,
Aye.
Sammy,
No,
and I. Consider the approval of the 2024-25 Board of Education handbook.
make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie.
Aye.
Teresa,
Aye.
Sammy,
Aye.
and I. Consider the approval of Leadership Associates agreement for consultant services.
I motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie.
Aye.
Teresa,
Aye.
Sammy,
Aye.
and I. Consider the approval of the independent contractor service agreement with Coach Q LLC for staff development and leadership consulting.
I motion to approve.
I'll second. Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie.
Aye.
Teresa,
Aye.
Sammy,
Aye.
and I. Consider the approval of the Parsec data proposal for 2024-25.
I'll motion to approve.
Second. Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie.
Aye.
Teresa,
Aye.
Sammy,
Aye.
and I. Consider the approval of the 2024-25 budget.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie.
Aye.
Teresa,
Aye.
Sammy,
Aye.
and I. Consider the approval of the 2024-25 local control and accountability plan.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie.
Aye.
Teresa,
Aye.
Sammy,
Aye.
and I. Consider the approval of the Prop 28 annual expenditure plan.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie.
Aye.
Teresa,
Aye.
Sammy,
Aye.
and I. Consider the approval of the John C. Fremont discard list for library books.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie.
Aye.
Teresa,
Aye.
Sammy,
Aye.
and I. Consider the approval of a proposal from Corcoran High School to purchase pre-calculus textbooks.
I motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie. Aye. Teresa.
Aye.
Sammy.
Aye.
And I. Consider the approval of Golden State Pathways Program grant application.
I motion to approve. Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie. Aye. Teresa.
Aye.
Sammy.
Aye.
And I. Consider the approval of Perkins V grant application and advisory committee.
Make motion approved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie. Aye. Teresa.
Aye.
Sammy.
Aye.
And I. Consider approval of the Gilbert Electric Company proposal for John Muir Middle School gym lighting replacement.
I motion to approve. A second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie.
Aye.
Teresa.
Aye.
Sammy.
Aye.
And I. Consider the approval of the Robinson's Interiors bid for John Muir Middle School's new flooring for classrooms M2 and M6.
I motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie. Aye. Teresa. Aye. Sammy.
Aye.
And I. Consider the approval of A+ quality concrete construction estimate for John C. Fremont D-Wing sidewalk.
Make motion approved.
A second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie. Aye. Teresa. Aye. Sammy.
Aye.
And I. Consider approval of the A+ quality concrete construction estimate for John C. Fremont E-Wing sidewalk.
Motion to approve.
I'll second. Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie. Aye. Teresa. Aye. Sammy.
Aye.
And I. Consider approval of the contract paper group incorporated quote for cases of copy paper.
I'll motion. I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie. Aye. Teresa. Aye. Sammy.
Aye.
And I. Resolution number 1379, budget revision.
Make motion approved.
I second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie. Aye. Teresa. Aye. Sammy.
Aye.
And I. Resolution number 1380, estimated actuals program.
Motion to approve.
Second. Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie. Aye. Teresa. Aye. Sammy.
Aye.
And I. Resolution number 1381, board delegation of powers.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
In looking at the document, there's some clerical errors on it. Okay. Make sure that the correct document. Searching for it.
Yes, I see the error there. You want to make the revision in the motion and then would basically be to strike that name? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, she no longer works.
Yes. Right. So we can motion to, if you want a motion to strike the name, and then we can update the correct one. And then we'll probably need to anyways bring back another document in probably September or some other.
I motion to strike the name with the revision of the current.
CBA officer.
I'll second that one.
Roll call, Valerie. Aye. Teresa,
Aye.
Sammy.
Aye.
And I. Personnel, consider approval of the updated job title and description for fiscal manager to director of fiscal services.
Motion.
Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie.
Aye.
Teresa.
Aye.
Sammy.
Aye.
And I. Future agenda items.
I'd like to update on our nice property over on the corner quickly at Let's Avenue. What are we doing with that? It looks like it's abandoned and boarded up. What are plans for that? Madam President, I'd like to go back into closed session for one, planning question, please.
Return to closed session. $7:50.
Yeah.